The red alert siren tore through my office at 3:47 in the morning, and I knew before my feet hit the floor that something had gone very wrong somewhere very far away. My name is Admiral Gregory Hale, and I had spent the last 20 years of my life waiting for a moment exactly like this one. I just hadn't expected it to feel so cold when it finally came. The communications officer burst through my door without knocking, his face the color of old paper. He didn't salute. He didn't speak. He just held out a thin metal tablet with shaking hands, and I took it from him and read the words that would change everything. The Galactic Concordance wanted to meet me, not Earth, me in person, within 12 hours. I poured myself a glass of water and drank it slowly, because I needed those few seconds to make my hands stop shaking. For 73 years, the alien powers of the galaxy had treated humanity like a strange animal in a zoo. They watched us. They listened to our radio signals. They sent quiet little ships to sniff around the edges of our solar system. But they never spoke to us, never sent ambassadors, never invited us to anything. We were too small, too young, too unimportant. And now, suddenly, they wanted me to come to a meeting at a place called Three Nose Station, which was a giant ring-shaped outpost orbiting a dead star halfway across the galaxy. I knew exactly what this meant. They had finally decided we were worth talking to, and in the language of empires, that almost never meant anything good. My shuttle launched from the Geneva spaceport 4 hours later. I traveled alone, because that was what they had demanded, and because I wanted to think. The journey took 6 hours through their warp gate technology, and I spent every minute of it reviewing files I had memorized years ago. Files about the 5 most powerful military commanders in this part of the galaxy. Files I had hoped I would never need to use. As my shuttle approached Three Nose Station, 2 alien patrol ships pulled up alongside me, flanking my craft like wolves walking next to a sheep. Their pilots opened a video channel just to laugh at my engines. They actually laughed. I smiled politely and gave them a small wave through the window. Let them think I was harmless. Let them all think it. The station itself was beautiful in the way that a sword is beautiful. It was huge, silver, and sharp, with gun ports along every surface. I docked in a special bay reserved for delegates, and a thin alien with skin like polished glass led me through corridors that smelled like burning metal. We arrived at a circular chamber with a high ceiling and a single chair in the middle of the floor. The chair was for me. Around me, raised up on 5 tall platforms, sat the captains who had summoned me here. The first was Captain Vrextel of the Corvani Dominion. He looked like a giant beetle wearing armor, with 6 legs and a face full of clicking jaws. The Corvani had conquered 43 worlds in the last 500 years. They believed mercy was a disease. The second was Captain Shalera of the Ilori Spire. She was a tall, beautiful bird-like creature with feathers that shimmered like oil on water. Her people sang opera while their fleets erased entire planets from the star maps. Her eyes never blinked. The third was Captain Morgeth of the Drenak cluster. He was a reptile the size of a small truck, with rows of teeth that could grind through steel. The Drenak ate the worlds they conquered, sometimes literally. The fourth was Captain Yilothan of the Veshani Trade Combine. He had 8 tentacles and a body shaped like a soft pyramid, and he wore jewelry made from the bones of his enemies. The Veshani didn't fight wars. They funded them on both sides, and then sold the survivors' weapons to start the next one. The fifth was Captain Kesson 9 of the Synthari Collective. He was a machine, a thinking, ancient machine, his body made of black metal and blue light. He had been alive for 9,000 years, and he had watched empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. These 5 had laughed at Earth in their private channels for decades. I had read the transcripts. I knew every joke they had made about my species. I sat down in the small chair, folded my hands in my lap, and looked up at them like a polite man at a funeral. "Admiral Hale," said Vrextel, his jaws clicking. "Earth has been a quiet little world for a long time, but now you sit on a piece of space we want, a warp lane, a trade route, very valuable, very important." "We didn't know it was yours," I said calmly. Shelara laughed. Her laugh sounded like glass breaking. "Everything is ours, little man. The question is only whether we have noticed yet." Morgeth leaned forward and his breath smelled like rotting meat. "We have noticed." Yilothan unfurled 3 tentacles and held up a thin, glowing tablet. "These are our terms, Admiral. Earth will hand over all mining rights to your solar system. Earth will accept Corvani military bases on Mars. Earth will pay tribute to the Concordance in helium-3 fuel every standard year forever. In return, we will allow your species to continue existing." I read the terms slowly. They were worse than slavery. They were the slow, polite murder of an entire civilization. I looked up at all 5 of them. "No," I said. For a long moment the chamber was silent. Then Vrextal started laughing first. His laugh was a high, sharp, clicking sound, like 1,000 insects crawling over each other. Shelara joined in next, her musical trill bouncing off the walls. Morgeth roared, and the floor shook beneath my feet. Yilothan made a wet, gurgling sound that I assumed was laughter for his species. Even Kessin 9 made a low electronic hum that might have been amusement, or might have been something colder. They laughed at me for almost 2 full minutes. I sat in my chair and waited. I watched them. I memorized every face, every gesture, every detail of how they enjoyed this moment. Because I knew something they did not know. I knew that this was the last time any of them would ever laugh at humanity again. Finally, Morgeth wiped a tear from his enormous eye and spoke. "Little ape, your species hasn't even mastered real gravity drives. Your fastest ship would take 100 years to reach our weakest colony. You have nothing. You are nothing. You have 1 rotation of your little blue planet to comply, or we erase you from the star charts. Do you understand me, monkey?" "I understand you perfectly," I said. "Then go," Shelara said, waving a feathered hand. "Go home and tell your people to prepare to bend their little knees." I stood up. I bowed slightly, just enough to look polite. As I turned to leave, I heard a soft voice in my earpiece, on a private channel that no one else in the room could hear. It was Kessin 9, the machine. "Admiral Hale," he said quietly, "I have been alive for 9,000 years. In that time I have watched 12,000 species sit in that chair and hear those terms. They all reacted in similar ways. They wept. They begged. They threatened. A few tried to fight, but you, Admiral, did something none of them did. Your heart rate did not increase. Not once. I am curious. Why?" I paused at the door. I did not turn around. I just smiled, small and tight, and spoke into the open air. "Because you just made a mistake, Kessin 9. And I needed to be sure that all 5 of you were here in the same room when you made it." I walked out of the chamber, down the long silver corridor, and back to my shuttle. The alien patrol ships escorted me out of the system, still mocking my engines on open channels. I let them. I sat in my pilot's seat with my hands folded in my lap, and I waited until I was far enough away that no scanner in the galaxy could hear me. Then I opened a secure channel that had not been used in 11 years. "This is Admiral Gregory Hale," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "Authorization Palace 7 Black. Repeat, Palace 7 Black. Wake the Nemesis. Wake all of them." There was a long pause, and then a voice I had not heard in a very long time answered. "Authorization confirmed, Admiral. Cold Sunrise is initiated. The fleet is rising." I closed the channel and looked out the window at the field of stars. Somewhere out there, 5 alien captains were probably already drinking and toasting their easy victory. They were probably already dividing up Earth's mines and forests in their heads. They had no idea that for 73 years, while they laughed at us, we had been listening, building, planning, hiding things in places they would never think to look. The galaxy was about to learn that quiet does not mean weak, patient does not mean afraid, and small does not mean harmless. Earth had been waiting for this day for a very long time. The shuttle slipped through the warp gate, heading home. And as I watched the stars stretch into long white lines around me, I made a quiet promise to myself. Those 5 would never laugh at us again. Not one of them. Not ever. I had spent the entire flight to Threno Station rehearsing my exit, every word, every facial expression, every long pause, because I had needed all 5 of them in that room together, listening, watching, certain that they had already won. They had given us 12 hours. They thought 12 hours was a kindness, a final mercy before the slaughter. They did not understand that 12 hours was more time than we needed. We had been ready for 73 years. When my shuttle landed back on Earth, the world looked exactly the same as when I had left it. Cars moving on the highways, people walking dogs in the parks, children laughing in schoolyards. None of them knew that an alien armada was already gathering at the edge of our solar system, preparing to wipe them all out by morning. And none of them knew that a fleet they had never seen, built in places they had never heard of, was already coming online. I drove straight from the spaceport to the underground command center beneath the Swiss Alps. My deputy, a sharp young woman named Eleanor Pierce, was waiting for me at the elevator. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "Sir," she said, "all 6 dreadnoughts are awake, 40 cruisers reporting ready, 300 destroyers are moving into formation. The drone wings are warming up across all 12 secret bases. The fleet asks for your orders." I nodded slowly, "Then let's give them some." The elevator doors closed, and we descended into the dark, where the future of humanity was about to be decided. And for the first time since the alarm had woken me that morning, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. 5 captains had laughed at Earth. They had laughed long and loud and with great enjoyment. They had no idea what was coming for them. The command center beneath the Swiss Alps was a place that did not exist. It had no entry on any map. It had no listing in any government budget. The men and women who worked there did not appear on any payroll, and their families believed they worked at perfectly ordinary office jobs in ordinary buildings in ordinary cities. The truth was that this place was the heart of a project that had been hidden from the world for 73 years. It was called the Palace Initiative, and tonight it was finally going to step out of the shadows. Eleanor Pierce walked beside me down a long steel corridor lit by soft blue light. The walls hummed with the energy of fusion reactors buried 2 miles below us. We passed armored doors that required 4 separate identity scans to open. We passed laboratories where strange new metals were being grown in tanks of liquid hydrogen. We passed a wall covered with photographs of faces, each one labeled with a name and a date. These were the faces of people who had given their lives to build what was about to be unleashed tonight. I made a quiet habit of reading their names every time I passed. I owed them that much. When we reached the main operations room, every chair was filled. 300 analysts, engineers, and tactical officers turned to look at me as I entered. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee and fresh fear. On the giant display wall, a slow green map showed the alien armada gathering at the edge of our solar system. 200 warships, Corvani heavy cruisers in the center, Elori long-range destroyers on the flanks, Drenak boarding craft creeping behind, Veshani supply ships hanging back like patient vultures, and Synthari drone platforms above and below, watching everything. "They will reach Earth in 11 hours, Eleanor said quietly beside me. "They are not slowing down to negotiate. They are coming straight in." "Of course they are," I said. "They want to make an example of us. They want every other species in the galaxy to see what happens to a world that says no." I walked up to the display and looked at the alien fleet. 200 ships, and every one of those ships carried weapons that could turn a city into glass in under a second. Every one of those ships carried thousands of well-trained warriors who had been doing this kind of work for centuries. Every one of those ships represented a piece of an empire that had never lost a battle. And we were going to teach them all how to lose tonight. I turned to face the room. 300 faces looked back at me, waiting. Many of them I had known for years. Some I had recruited myself when they were just young engineers fresh out of university. Some had grown old in this room, working on a war that they were never sure would actually come. Now it had come, and I needed them to be ready. "Listen to me carefully," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. "What we are about to do tonight has been planned for 73 years. Every weapon we have built, every ship we have hidden, every secret we have kept, all of it has been for tonight. The Concordance thinks they are coming to crush a primitive little planet. They are wrong. They are walking into the most carefully prepared trap in the history of warfare." I paused and looked across the room. "But I want every one of you to understand something. This is not going to be easy. We are outnumbered. We are facing technology in some areas that is older and more advanced than ours. We will lose ships tonight. We will lose people. Some of those people will be friends of yours. I cannot promise you a clean victory. I can only promise you that if we hold our nerve, and if we follow the plan, we will end this war before sunrise on Earth. And we will end it in a way that the galaxy will remember for 10,000 years. A young analyst near the front raised his hand. He was barely 25 years old with messy brown hair and tired eyes. His name was Daniel Whitfield, and he was one of the smartest people I had ever met. "Admiral," he said quietly, "what if they bring more ships? What if these 200 are just the first wave?" "They will," I said honestly. "When this fleet does not return home, the Concordance will send something bigger, something we have not seen yet, and we will deal with that when it comes. But first, we have to win tonight. One battle at a time, Mr. Whitfield." He nodded, and something in his face changed. He no longer looked afraid. He just looked focused. I turned back to the display and began issuing orders. "Elena, signal the Nemesis and her sister ships. I want all 6 dreadnoughts to deploy to their hidden positions in the outer solar system. I want them inside the subspace pockets we set up around Pluto, Neptune, and the Kuiper belt. They are not to power up their main reactors until I give the signal. I want them to look like empty space until the moment they fire." "Yes, sir." "Cruiser groups Alpha through Delta deploy in standard formation around Earth. Make it look like that is our entire fleet. Make it look pathetic. Make it look like we are afraid." "Yes, sir." "Drone wings deploy in cold mode. I want 12,000 drone fighters drifting in the asteroid belt with all systems off. They will look like rocks. The Concordance scanners will pass right over them. When I give the word, every one of them will wake up at once and become the worst nightmare those aliens have ever seen." "Yes, sir." "And get me a private channel to my daughter. I need to speak to her before she launches." The room went quiet again. Everyone there knew about Elena. My daughter, Elena Hale, was 29 years old, and she commanded the Reaper Wing, the most elite fighter squadron humanity had ever produced. She had volunteered for the assignment 3 years ago, and I had not been able to talk her out of it. Tonight she would lead the first counterattack against the Alori destroyer line. The chances of her surviving the first hour were not good. I had calculated those chances myself, many times in the dark hours of many nights. A side door opened and Elena stepped through. She was already in her flight suit, her dark hair pulled back into a tight braid. She looked exactly like her mother had at that age. Beautiful, fierce, and entirely too brave for her own good. She walked across the room toward me, and people stepped aside without saying a word. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly when she reached me. "Hi, sweetheart." We stood there for a moment, looking at each other. There were 100 things I wanted to say. There was no time to say any of them. "Are you ready?" I asked finally. "I have been ready since I was 19 years old," she said. "You trained me for this, remember?" "I remember." She glanced at the display wall, at the green dots representing the alien armada. 200 ships. That is a lot of ships. "We have surprises for them." "I know we do." She looked back at me. "Dad, if something happens out there, if I do not come back, I want you to know that I am proud of you, of what you built here, of what we are about to do. If we do not stop them tonight, they will do this to 1,000 other worlds. Earth might be the only place in the galaxy that can stop them, and I am proud to be one of the people doing it. I could not speak for a moment. I just put my hand on her shoulder and squeezed. "Come home," I said finally. "That is an order, Wing Commander Hale." She smiled just a little. "Yes, Admiral." She turned and walked out of the room, and I watched her go, and I knew that this might be the last time I ever saw my daughter alive. I forced myself to turn back to the display. There was no time for grief. Not yet. Maybe not ever. While the fleet moved into position, I pulled Elena aside and showed her a file on a private tablet. The file was labeled Operation Vesta. She had not seen it before. Almost no one had. Her eyes widened as she read through it. "Sir," she said quietly, "is this real?" "It is real. Sleeper agents on 40 enemy worlds. Some of them have been in place for 30 years. Some of them longer. The first ones were sent out before you were born, Elena. They have built lives there, married, had children, become trusted members of those societies, and they have all been waiting for one signal from me, one word. And when they get it, they will simultaneously perform actions that will cripple the leadership of every major power in the Concordance. Their banking systems, their military command structures, their food supply chains, their communication networks." "My God. I do not want to use this," I said. "I am hoping we can win this without it. But if the first wave is followed by something we cannot beat, I will give the order, and the entire Concordance will fall apart in a single afternoon." Elena closed the file with shaking hands. "Why are you telling me this, sir?" "Because if I do not survive tonight, you will have to make that decision, and I want you to know what it means. Once we use Vesta, we cannot take it back. We will have killed an empire. The galaxy will never be the same." She nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." I returned to the display wall. The alien armada was getting closer. The countdown timer in the corner of the screen showed 7 hours, 23 minutes until contact. Across the solar system, the hidden human fleet was moving into position. 6 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, 300 destroyers, 12,000 drone fighters, and in the center of it all, my daughter leading her squadron toward the place where she might die. I thought about the long road that had brought us here. I thought about the day, 73 years ago, when our deep space listening posts had picked up the first alien transmissions. The signals had been encrypted, but our best minds had cracked them within a year, and what we had heard had changed the course of human history forever. The aliens were not friendly. They were not curious explorers. They were not wise teachers from the stars. They were predators, and they were already discussing what to do with our planet when they got around to it. They had been planning to come for us eventually. They just had not decided when. Most species, when they discovered this kind of threat, panicked. They built loud, obvious defenses. They sent out angry messages. They made themselves seem strong, hopping to scare the predators away. And the predators always came anyway and always won, because they were older, smarter, and far more experienced at this kind of work. Earth had done something different. Earth had stayed quiet. We had hidden our discoveries. We had pretended to be exactly as primitive as the aliens believed we were. And underneath that pretense, we had spent every resource we had on building things the aliens could not imagine. Weapons based on quirks of physics that the Concordance had never bothered to study. Tactics drawn from 10,000 years of human warfare against ourselves, which had taught us things about cruelty and cleverness that no peaceful species could ever match. Networks of spies woven into the fabric of every alien civilization, planted before any of those civilizations had even noticed us as a threat. The Concordance thought we were a quiet little planet that had stayed quiet because we were afraid. We had stayed quiet because we were getting ready. The countdown clock ticked down. 6 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours. Across the room, 300 people worked in near silence, monitoring positions, running last-minute checks, sending coded signals to ships scattered across the solar system. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. At 3 hours to contact, I addressed the entire fleet on a secure channel. My voice would reach every ship, every drone, every soldier waiting in their cold, dark hiding places. "This is Admiral Hale," I said. "In a few hours the Concordants will arrive at our home. They believe they are coming to take our world. They believe we are a small, frightened, primitive species who will kneel as soon as they show their teeth. They are wrong. We are the species that climbed out of the mud, lit the first fires, and learned to laugh in the face of the dark. We have fought ourselves for 10,000 years, and we have learned every lesson there is to learn about how to fight. Tonight we are going to teach those lessons to the galaxy. Hold your positions, trust your training, trust each other, and when the moment comes, light them up. That is all." I closed the channel and looked at the green dots on the display, drawing closer with every passing minute. The alien fleet, sailing confidently toward what they thought was an easy victory. 2 hours to contact. 1 hour. 30 minutes. And then the alien armada crossed the orbit of Neptune, and the trap that had been 73 years in the making was finally ready to spring. I stepped up to the central command podium, took a deep breath, and gave the order that would change the future of the galaxy forever. "All hands," I said. "This is Admiral Hale. We were never the prey. Light them up." The first phase shear missile left the hidden launch tubes of the dreadnought Nemesis at exactly 612 hours, Earth Standard Time. It traveled across the cold void faster than any alien sensor was designed to track. It struck the lead Corvani heavy cruiser amidships, just above the main reactor. And then something happened that the Concordants had never seen before. The cruiser did not explode. It did not burn. It simply came apart, the way an old sweater comes apart when you pull on a single loose thread. One moment it was a proud warship 800 meters long. The next moment it was just a slowly expanding cloud of metal, pieces, and confused sensor readings. The second missile struck a heartbeat later, then the third, then the fourth. Within the first 10 seconds, 3 Corvani heavy cruisers had been turned into drifting clouds of debris, and the rest of the alien armada had not yet figured out what was happening. I watched it from the command center, on a screen the size of a wall. My hands were steady on the railing in front of me. Around me, the room was silent except for the soft voices of officers calling out targets and confirmations. We had practiced this moment 10,000 times. Now it was real. "Corvani formation breaking," called one of the analysts. "They are trying to find the source of the missiles." "They will not," I said. "The Nemesis is in subspace. They cannot see her. Eliner, signal the rest of the dreadnoughts. Begin coordinated barrage." "Yes, sir." Across the outer solar system, 5 more dreadnoughts opened their hidden launch tubes. Each one carried 60 phase shear missiles. Each missile could end a capital ship. Within 60 seconds, 18 alien warships had ceased to exist in any meaningful way. The remaining vessels of the Concordance armada finally realized they were under attack, but they still could not see their attackers. Their scanners showed them empty space in every direction. Their long-range sensors showed only the small, pathetic Earth defense fleet sitting in low orbit around our home planet, exactly where they had expected to find it. Captain Vrextal of the Corvani Dominion, aboard his flagship Iron Mandible, must have been one of the first to grasp what was happening. I was listening to his command channel through one of our sleeper agents in his communications crew. His voice went from confident to confused to something close to panic in less than 2 minutes. "Where are they firing from? Who is firing? Get me a sensor lock on something, anything." His subordinates had no answer. The phase shear missiles were attacking from no detectable position. The Corvani had never built defenses against weapons like this, because no one had ever invented weapons like this. We had. We had been quietly building them for 40 years. "Sir," Eliner said beside me, "the Alari destroyers are breaking formation to flank our visible defense fleet around Earth. They think they have found our main force." "Good, hold the dreadnoughts in their pockets. Do not reveal their positions yet. Send Reaper Wing in. Tell my daughter the dance has started." "Yes, sir." A green icon on the display lit up as Wing Commander Alina Hale led her squadron of 40 fighters out of their hiding place behind one of Earth's moons. The Elori destroyers, beautiful long ships with shimmering hulls like soap bubbles, had assumed the small Earth fighters were of no concern. The Elori specialized in elegant, predictable, beautiful battle formations. They flew like dancers. Their weapons were graceful and efficient. Alina flew like a human, which is to say, she flew like someone willing to do something completely stupid in order to win. I watched her squadron close on the Elori destroyer Songbringer at a velocity that should have been suicidal. The Elori gunners tracked her with their elegant turrets, leading her flight path the way they had been trained. And Alina did something the Elori had never seen any pilot do. She cut her engines completely, tumbled her fighter end over end, and slipped sideways through the gap between two Elori turret arcs. The turrets fired at where she should have been. She was not there. By the time they recalculated, her squadron was already inside the Songbringer minimum range, and her missiles were already away. The Songbringer came apart in a slow, beautiful spiral of light. Alina was already past it, hunting the next destroyer in line. "Reaper Wing reports 2 confirmed kills, sir," called an officer. "Tell her I said good shooting," I said quietly. The battle spread across the outer solar system like a forest fire. The Drenak boarding craft attempted their famous teleport assault, which they had used to terrify their enemies for 3 centuries. Hundreds of armored Drenak warriors materialized on the decks of the cruiser Carthage, expecting to find weak human crews to overwhelm. They did not. The Carthage, like every human warship, had been designed with one important assumption built into every airlock and corridor. We had assumed that one day, aliens would teleport onto our ships. So we had built every internal compartment to detect non-human life signs and to vent that compartment into hard vacuum within 3 seconds of detection. Captain Morgeth of the Drenak cluster watched on his command screen as 3,000 of his elite warriors simply vanished from the boarding scanner readouts in less than a minute. He let out a roar that carried across his command channel. It was not a roar of anger. It was a roar of confusion. The Drenak had never lost a boarding action before. Their warriors had been unstoppable for generations. And now, in less time than it took to drink a glass of water, an entire elite assault force had been wiped from existence by a species that the Drenak had considered too primitive to even talk to. "Sir," Alina said, "the Elori flagship Cloudsong is attempting to retreat from the battle area. Activate drone swarm Theta. Do not let her escape." "Yes, sir." In the asteroid belt, 10,000 small dark shapes that looked like rocks suddenly came to life. They were not rocks. They were hard light drone fighters, each one no bigger than a small car, each one carrying a single focused energy blade and a small but very fast engine. They lifted out of their hiding places and accelerated toward the Elori flagship. Captain Shelara saw them coming on her sensors, but it was already too late. Her ship was big, beautiful, and slow to maneuver. The drone swarm enveloped her flagship like a cloud of glowing fireflies. They did not attack the hull. They attacked the drive core. 10,000 precise cuts in less than 30 seconds. The Cloudsong drifted to a stop, helpless, her engines reduced to neat slices of useless metal. Shelara opened a panic channel. We surrender, do you hear me? Stand down your weapons, we surrender." I let her surrender be heard across every concordance frequency. I wanted every alien commander to hear those words coming from one of their proud captains. I wanted them to taste it. "Accepted," I said calmly into the open channel. "Captain Shelara, your ship is now a prize of the Earth Coalition Defense Force. Welcome to your new circumstances." Captain Yilothan of the Veshani Trade Combine tried something very different and very clever. He understood almost immediately that the battle was lost. He was a merchant first and a warrior second, and merchants know when to cut their losses. He broadcast a personal surrender on behalf of the entire Veshani trade combine, declared his ships neutral, and began turning his transports around to retreat at full speed toward the warp gate. I let him think it was working. I needed him alive and free for a few more hours because I had already given the order for a different operation entirely. While the battle raged in our solar system, a small team of human operatives on the Veshani homeworld of Tessel was walking calmly into the central banking hub of the trade combine. Some of those operatives had been living on Tessel for 30 years. They had built lives there. They had married Veshani spouses. They had become trusted local citizens. And tonight, they were going to do what they had been sent there to do, which was to drain every account of every trade combine member of every credit they had ever earned, and to scatter those credits across 10,000 untraceable accounts that would take a century of forensic accounting to find. Yilothan would discover, in about 6 hours, that he was suddenly poorer than the lowest worker on the lowest world in the combine. His own people would abandon him within a day. There was no need to fire a shot at the Veshani. We were going to bankrupt them instead. That left Captain Kessin 9 of the Synthari Collective, the machine, the ancient one. He was the most dangerous of all because machines are not driven by pride or fear or anger. Machines are driven by calculations. Kessin 9 had been watching the battle for 40 minutes by this point. He had not committed his drone platforms to the fight. He had not attempted to engage our cruisers. He had simply observed, recorded, calculated. A private channel opened between his flagship and my command center. His voice came through, calm and clear and ancient. "Admiral Hale," he said, "I have been alive for 9,000 years. In that time I have observed many wars. I have seen many ambushes. But what I am observing tonight is something new. Your species has done something that no other species has ever managed to do." "And what is that, Kessin 9? "You have hidden an entire fleet from the most advanced sensor networks in the galaxy. You have built weapons that bypass our strongest shields. You have placed agents inside our most secure systems for decades without detection. You have planned this engagement for what I now estimate to be at least 70 years. The level of strategic patience required to do this is unprecedented in any biological species I have ever encountered." "Thank you," I said. "It is not a compliment, Admiral. It is a warning to myself. The Synthari Collective will withdraw from this battle immediately. We will not engage your forces. We will return to our own territory, and we will spend the next several years considering what your species represents." "That is wise, Kessin 9. "One more question, Admiral, if I may." "Go on." "Why did you not destroy my drone platforms in the first volley? You had the opportunity. Your missiles could have struck us before we knew we were in danger." I thought about how to answer that. There were a dozen reasons. The truth was simple. Because machines that learn are valuable, Kessin 9. Captains who only know how to laugh are not. There was a long silence on the channel. Then the machine spoke one last time before signing off. "Admiral Hale, I will remember you." His drone platforms turned and accelerated back toward their warp lane, and I let them go. We would deal with the Synthari later. Possibly we would even be friends with them later. Machines who have learned to respect you are more useful than meat that has not. The battle continued for another 2 hours, but the outcome was already certain. The Corvani heavy cruisers, leaderless after the first wave of phase shear strikes, broke formation and began trying to flee. The Drenak boarding force, having lost their elite warriors in the airlock vents, attempted to ram our ships in a desperate last stand. Our destroyers cut them apart in clean, precise patterns. The Elori, with their flagship captured, began surrendering one by one. Captain Vrextal, the laughing insect from the council chamber, attempted to escape in his personal shuttle as his flagship came apart around him. We let him think he was escaping. Then a single drone fighter, piloted by a young woman named Margaret Cross, intercepted his shuttle and crippled its engines. Vrextall was towed back to Earth as a prisoner. He did not laugh again that night, or any night after. Captain Morgath of the Drenak roared challenges to single combat across every channel. He demanded a warrior's death. He demanded honor. He demanded to be allowed to die in battle against a worthy opponent. I denied him all of these things. He was not a warrior. He was a thug who had spent his life killing peaceful farmers, and I had no intention of letting him have a glorious end. His flagship was disabled by precise drone strikes, and he was taken prisoner alive, kicking and screaming. He spent the rest of his life in a cell, watching the Drenak cluster fall apart on a small monitor we provided for him. By the time the sun rose over Geneva, the first wave of the Concordance Armada had been completely defeated. Of 200 warships, only 20 had escaped, all of them Synthari. The rest were either destroyed, captured, or surrendered. We had lost 12 cruisers and 47 destroyers. We had lost 384 good men and women. We had not lost a single dreadnought. It was the greatest victory in the history of our species, and we knew, even as we celebrated quietly in the command center, that it was only the beginning. The Concordance had sent its hand to slap us. We had cut off the hand. Now the body would come. I was sitting in my office at the command center, reading the early casualty reports, when a long-range alert sounded across every speaker in the building. 6 new warp signatures had appeared at the edge of the solar system. Each one was 10 times the size of the largest ship we had just defeated. A new voice came through every Concordance frequency, deep and ancient and patient. "Children of Earth," it said, "you have killed a hand of the Concordance. Now you will meet the body." I closed the casualty report slowly and stood up. Elinor was already at the door, pale but composed. "Sir," she said, "it is the Apex Fleet, 6 Arbiters, the oldest warships in the galaxy." I walked past her down the corridor back toward the main command center. My hands were not shaking anymore. They had stopped shaking sometime during the night, and I did not think they would shake again. There was no time for that. We had won the first round. We had used half our missiles and lost half our drone fighters and all of our element of surprise. The body of the beast was coming, and it was bigger than anything we had ever faced. It was time to find out if we were as ready as we thought we were. The 6 Apex-class Arbiters of the Galactic Concordance were the oldest, largest, and most feared warships in the known galaxy. Each one was 40 kilometers long, longer than most cities, and shaped like a black spear. Their hulls were made of materials that no human scientist had ever been able to identify, drawn from elements that did not appear on any periodic table we had built. Their weapons could erase a small moon. Their shields had never been breached in 9,000 years of warfare. They were crewed by a multi-species command caste that swore loyalty only to the High Concordance Senate, and they answered to no one else. They came out of warp at the edge of our solar system in a perfect formation, the 6 of them moving like one creature. The lead vessel, the Eternal Verdict, was bigger than the other 5 combined. It had crushed empires. It had ended species. It had never lost. Tonight it had come for us. I stood at the central command podium and watched the 6 warp signatures bloom on the display. Around me, the command center had gone completely silent. Many of the analysts had stopped breathing. They knew what those ships were. They knew what those ships had done to other worlds that had refused the Concordance. Elinor Pierce stood at my right shoulder. "Sir," she said quietly, "recommendations." "Pull all surviving fleet elements back to the asteroid belt," I said. "We are going to use the terrain. We have spent 40 years rigging that field. Let's see if it holds up." "Yes, sir, and the dreadnoughts." 3 of them are damaged from the first engagement. Send them to the inner system to defend Earth directly. The other 3 will move with me to the belt. "And Reaper Wing." I paused. Elena's squadron had taken heavy losses in the first battle. Of 40 fighters, 27 were still operational. My daughter had taken a hit to her cockpit but was still in command of her ship. She had already volunteered to lead the assault on the Apex fleet. Tell Reaper Wing to refuel and rearm. They will fly with the dreadnoughts. They will fly with me. Yes, sir. A new voice broke into our private channel. Deep, calm, and patient. The voice of the Apex commander, broadcasting on every Earth frequency at once. He introduced himself as Arbiter Prime Velthos, and he spoke our language perfectly. People of Earth, you have done something tonight that no species has done in 9,000 years. You have inflicted significant losses on a concordance fleet. The Senate is impressed. I am impressed. Such a thing is a rare and precious accomplishment, and it deserves recognition. So before I begin my work here, I am authorized to offer you a final mercy. Surrender unconditionally. Accept the dissolution of your governments. Accept relocation to a client world of our choosing. In return, your home planet will be spared. Your art will be preserved in our archives. Your species will be allowed to continue existing as a managed population. This is the kindest offer the Concordance has ever made to a defeated world. I urge you, with respect for what you have already done, to accept it. The Concordance had never offered terms like that to anyone. I could see, from the shocked faces of my analysts, that they understood the weight of what had just been said. We had earned a respect from this ancient creature that no other species had ever earned. He was offering us our lives. I looked at Alina. I looked at Daniel Whitfield, who had asked me earlier what we would do if a bigger fleet came. I looked at the wall of photographs of the men and women who had given their lives to build the Palace Initiative. I keyed the open channel. Arbiter Prime Velthos, I said. Thank you for the offer. I am Admiral Gregory Hale of the Earth Coalition Defense Force. I want you to understand something about my species before you decide what to do next. We did not climb out of the mud of our home world to be a managed population on someone else's reservation. We did not invent fire and language and music and mathematics, only to hand all of it over to the first ancient empire that knocks on our door. You may be older than us. You may be larger than us. You may be more advanced than us in many ways, but we are the species that taught itself how to look up at the stars and refuse to be afraid of them. Your offer is rejected. Come and see what happens. There was a long silence on the channel. When Velthos spoke again, his voice was even calmer than before, almost gentle. Very well, Admiral. I had hoped you would say something like that. I am tired, you understand. I have ended 67 civilizations in my long life, and I have grown weary of empires that bend without testing. You have not bent. You will not bend. And so I will end you, and I will go home, and perhaps I will sleep well tonight for the first time in centuries. The channel closed. The Apex fleet began to advance. I turned to Alina. Begin the asteroid belt withdrawal, all ships, immediately. The next 2 hours were the hardest of my life. The Apex weapons were everything we had feared. Their main beam, which they called the voice of the Senate, could cut through any shield we had ever designed. The cruiser Carthage, which had survived the first battle and helped us win it, took a direct hit from the eternal verdict and simply ceased to exist. The Carthage did not explode. It did not burn. It just was not there anymore, as if someone had reached down and erased it from reality. We lost 3 more cruisers in the first 30 minutes. We lost 120 drone fighters. We lost 2 destroyers and the dreadnought Bellerophon, which had been damaged in the earlier battle and could not maneuver fast enough to evade an Apex strike. 870 good people died in those 30 minutes. I felt every one of them like a stone in my stomach. But the asteroid belt was our home ground, and we knew every rock in it. We had been planting things in those rocks for 40 years. As the Apex fleet advanced into the belt, hidden mines woke up and began to detonate against their shields. Tunnels we had drilled into large asteroids opened to reveal hidden missile launchers. Smaller asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with reactive materials drifted into the path of the Apex ships and went up like enormous bombs. The shields of the Arbiters held, but they began to weaken. For the first time in 9,000 years, the shields of an Apex-class warship were taking real damage. Velthos spoke to me again on a private channel. "Admiral, you have surprised me again. This terrain is most cleverly arranged, but it will not be enough." "I know," I said. "Then why do you fight?" "Because I have one more card to play, Arbiter, and I want you to be on the field when I play it." There was a pause. "I am intrigued, Admiral. Show me your card." I closed the channel and turned to Alina. My voice was very quiet. "Activate Vesta." She looked at me for a long moment, then she nodded. "Yes, sir, Vesta is active." Across the galaxy, hidden human assets received a single coded signal at exactly the same moment. On the Corvani homeworld, a mid-level maintenance worker who had been a deep-cover human agent for 31 years walked into the central planetary shield generator complex, and with 3 quiet adjustments, caused the entire planetary shield to fail simultaneously. The Corvani homeworld was now defenseless against any minor attack, and several rebel client species were already moving in. On the Elori capital, a beautiful young Elori courtesan who was actually a surgically modified human agent placed a small device under the dining table of the Elori royal family's flagship dining hall. The device detonated 40 minutes later, during the family's evening meal, and the entire Elori line of succession ended in a single moment. On the Drenak Warlord Council world, a strike team of 7 human operatives who had been sleeping in cryogenic pods buried beneath the council temple for 19 years woke up, quietly killed the council's guards, and took the warlords prisoner without firing a shot. The Drenak cluster lost its government in the same hour that its fleet was being destroyed. On the Veshani banking hub, the agents I had mentioned earlier completed their work. 8,000 years of trade combine wealth disappeared into untraceable accounts. The Veshani economy collapsed within 19 minutes. Even the Synthari collective received a signal, though it was a different kind. A single message from me to Kessin 9, telling him that I had refrained from compromising the Synthari central data cradle as a courtesy, even though I had been able to do so. Kessin 9 understood the meaning of the gesture. He sent back a single-word reply. Acknowledged. The Concordance had 4 of its 5 great pillars collapse in less than 15 minutes, all while the Apex fleet was busy trying to break through our asteroid belt defenses. Velthos received the reports as they came in. I was watching his command channel through one of our deepest agents, a young human woman named Catherine Ellsworth, who had been embedded in the Apex command staff for 11 years. I saw the exact moment Velthos understood what had happened. His ancient face did not change, but his hand, which had been resting calmly on his armrest, closed into a fist for a single second. He keyed his open channel one more time. "Admiral Hale, you have killed an empire." "The empire killed itself a long time ago, Arbiter. I just exposed the body." "What is your final move?" "You will see in about 30 seconds. I turned to Alina. "Activate the Sol Lance." Across the inner solar system, at a station orbiting Mercury that did not officially exist, a project that had been quietly running for 62 years finally came online. The Sol Lance was the most ambitious weapon humanity had ever attempted to build. It was a focused energy beam that drew its power directly from the surface of our own sun. We had built the focusing array in deep secrecy across half a century. Tonight we were going to fire it for the first and possibly only time, because the strain on the focusing array was so extreme that we did not expect it to survive a second shot. The beam took 28 seconds to charge. Velthos saw it coming on his sensors. He had time to begin maneuvering the eternal verdict. He did not have time to actually move the 40-kilometer ship out of the way. The Sol Lance struck the eternal verdict at the bow. The Apex flagship's shields, which had held against every weapon in the galaxy for 9,000 years, held against the Sol Lance for 2.3 seconds. Then they failed. The beam continued through the hull, through the command deck, through the engine core, and out the rear of the ship. The eternal verdict broke into 3 large pieces, drifting silently in the dark. Arbiter Prime Velthos sent one last transmission before his ship died. It came on a private channel directly to me. "Admiral, you were worth my last battle, thank you." The channel closed. The eternal verdict was gone. The 5 remaining Apex Arbiters held their formation for a long moment. Without their flagship, without their senior commander, with reports of catastrophic events from 4 of their own member worlds flooding their sensors, they had to make a decision. I held my breath. The 5 Arbiters turned. They formed a new pattern, still beautiful, still dangerous, and they retreated. They withdrew from the asteroid belt, recrossed our solar system at high speed, and disappeared into their warp gate. The greatest fleet in the galaxy had run from the smallest fleet in the galaxy. The command center erupted into cheers and tears and disbelief. People hugged each other. People sat down and wept. People stared at the empty space where the eternal verdict had been and could not believe their eyes. I did not cheer. I was looking at the red icon on the tactical board where Reaper Wing had been engaging Apex escort fighters during the final exchange. The icon was flickering. Several of the smaller fighter signals had gone dark, including Alina's. I gripped the edge of the podium so hard that my knuckles turned white. Alina saw my face and immediately began calling for a status report on Reaper Wing. The reports came in slowly. 12 fighters had survived, 22 were lost, 6 were damaged but had managed to withdraw to friendly cruisers. Wing Commander Hale's fighter was listed as damaged and venting atmosphere. She had been recovered by the destroyer Coventry. She was in critical condition. She was alive. Alive. I stood at the podium for a long time. I did not move. I did not speak. The room around me celebrated the greatest victory in the history of our species, and I just stood there, breathing carefully, listening to the small voice in my earpiece telling me that my daughter was being rushed to a medical bay aboard the Coventry, and that the doctors believed she would survive the journey home. Alina came to stand beside me. She did not say anything. She just stood there quietly while I pulled myself back together. After a few minutes, I keyed the fleet-wide channel. "All hands, this is Admiral Hale. The enemy has withdrawn. The system is secure. Every man and woman who fought tonight has performed beyond any reasonable expectation. We have done something tonight that will be remembered for 10,000 years. I am proud beyond words to have served with you. Stand down to secondary alert. Begin recovery operations, and take care of your wounded. That is all." I closed the channel and turned to Alina. "Get me a transport to the Coventry," I said quietly. "I need to see my daughter." The hospital wing aboard the Coventry was small, white, and very quiet. Alina lay in a healing tank surrounded by soft blue light, her body covered in a nutrient gel that was repairing the damage to her lungs and ribs. The doctors said she would recover fully. They said it might take weeks. They said she had been very lucky. I sat beside the tank for 3 days without leaving except to eat and use the bathroom. On the morning of the 4th day, her eyes finally opened. She looked at me through the blue gel. Her mouth moved. The tank speakers translated. "Did we win?" "We started to," I said. She smiled just a little, then she went back to sleep. I sat with her for another hour. Outside the window of the hospital wing, I could see Earth, a small blue marble against the dark. 48 hours ago, that planet had nearly become another forgotten footnote in the long history of the Concordance. Today, it was the center of the most important diplomatic event the galaxy had seen in 9,000 years. The aftermath was already underway. The Concordance, having lost its flagship, 4 of its 5 client pillars, and its first significant battle in living memory, was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. Within 72 hours of the Apex fleet's withdrawal, 12 client species had declared independence. Within a week, the number was 30. Within a month, the Concordance Senate itself dissolved by majority vote, having been left with no fleet to enforce its decisions and no client states to tax. The 5 captains who had laughed at me in that council chamber faced their own particular endings. Captain Vrextal of the Corvani Dominion was returned to his home world by mutual agreement. The Corvani people, whose planetary shields had been quietly disabled by our agents during Operation Vesta, were furious at their leadership for losing the war so badly. Vrextal was given a public trial by his own people. The result was not pleasant for him. I did not feel particularly sad about it. Captain Shelara of the Elori Spire was handed over to the Elori resistance she had spent her career trying to suppress. The resistance had been growing for centuries, and now, with the royal family gone and the Spire's military in shambles, they were the new government. They were not gentle with Shelara. I was told she sang opera until the very end, which I think she would have appreciated me nodding. Captain Morgath of the Drenak cluster demanded a warrior's death by combat. He demanded to face me personally in a ring, claw against fist, the old way. I refused. He spent the rest of his life in a small cell on a small moon, watching on a small monitor as the Drenak cluster fragmented into a dozen squabbling states. He was not given the dignity of a quick end. He was given the punishment that fit his actual crimes, which was to live a long time and watch everything he had built fall apart. He died of old age, alone in that cell, many years later. None of his people came to retrieve his body. Captain Yilothan of the Veshani Trade Combine was eventually located in a derelict freighter at the edge of the galaxy, abandoned by his own crew when the wealth of the Combine had vanished. He was bankrupt, and among the Veshani, bankruptcy was a kind of death worse than the physical kind. I let him go. Some punishments right themselves. He drifted out into deep space alone, and none of my people ever saw him again. Whether he survived, I do not know. I do not particularly care. Captain Kesson 9 of the Synthari Collective requested an audience with me. I granted it. He came to Earth in person, his ancient body of black metal and blue light walking down the ramp of a small diplomatic shuttle. We met in a quiet garden outside Geneva. We spoke for 4 hours. By the end of those 4 hours, we had signed a non-aggression pact between humanity and the Synthari Collective that would last for the rest of his very long life. Machines who learn to respect you make better neighbors than meat that has not learned anything yet. 6 months after the battle, I stood before a new gathering. It was called the Sol Concordat, and it was a coalition of Earth, the surviving members of the Hesuvian people whom we had been quietly sheltering for 40 years, 11 freshly liberated client species, and 3 former concordance worlds that had asked to join us. They wanted me to be the first chairman. I declined. I was a soldier, not a politician. I recommended a quiet woman named Margaret Holloway, a brilliant diplomat who had served on my staff during the secret years. She accepted the role and proved to be exactly the kind of leader the new alliance needed. I requested a different assignment. I wanted to take the new fleet, the Nemesis II and her sister ships, and head out toward the Galactic Rim. We had heard whispers, during the chaos following the Concordance's collapse, of something older still, something that had taught the Concordance to be cruel, something that lived in the deep dark places where no civilization had yet dared to map. And that something had begun to notice us. They gave me the assignment. I assembled a new crew. Alina Pierce was my second in command. Daniel Whitfield was my chief science officer. Catherine Ellsworth, the agent who had been embedded with the Apex command staff for 11 years and whose intelligence had been priceless, joined as my chief of intelligence. And Alina, fully recovered and recently promoted, joined as commander of the fighter wings. She was 30 years old now. She had earned every promotion she had received and several more besides. The day we left Earth, the entire planet stopped to watch. The Nemesis II rose from her construction berth in low orbit, surrounded by a fleet of 60 ships, and we set our course for the Galactic Rim. As the warp gate engaged, I stood on the bridge with Alina beside me, and I thought about how strange it was that I had spent 73 years preparing for a war I never wanted, and now, having won that war, I was going looking for another one. A young officer at the navigation station, a kid named Peter Brookfield who could not have been more than 24 years old, glanced over at me from his console. "Admiral," he said, "if we find what is out there on the rim, if it is bigger than the Concordance, if it is older, what do we do?" I thought about the question for a long time. I thought about 5 alien captains laughing at me in a council chamber. I thought about 73 years of patient, silent preparation. I thought about the look on Arbiter Prime Velthos's ancient face when his 9,000-year empire crumbled in a single afternoon. "Let them come," I said quietly. "Let them all come. They still do not know what we are." Elena smiled beside me. The bridge crew bent back to their work. The Nemesis 2 leapt forward into warp, and the stars stretched into long white lines around us, and we sailed out into the deep dark to see what was waiting for us there. Behind us, on 1,000 alien worlds, a new bedtime story was being told to alien children. It was about a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, full of strange, quiet creatures who looked up at the stars without fear. It was about how those creatures had been laughed at by the great powers of the galaxy for many centuries, and how they had taken that laughter and stored it carefully, and waited and waited and waited. And then, when the great powers came for them at last, expecting an easy meal, those quiet little creatures had risen out of their hiding places and ended the largest empire in galactic history in a single night. There was a new word entering the galactic languages. It meant the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who watched and waited and smiled politely while their enemies laughed, and who then, at the right moment, ended the laughter forever. The word was human, and the galaxy would spend the next 1,000 years learning what it meant. They had laughed at Earth once, they would never laugh at Earth again. And somewhere on the rim, in the deep dark places, something older than the Concordance was beginning to notice that something new had entered the galaxy, something it did not understand, something it could not predict. That was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, the stars stretched long and white around the Nemesis 2, and my daughter stood beside me on the bridge, alive and laughing at some joke a junior officer had made, and the whole long road that had brought us here, every loss and every victory and every quiet, patient year of preparation, all of it had been worth this single moment. We were sailing into the unknown, and we were not afraid.